Welcome to Uniquely Brilliant, a podcast for creative, quirky, and extraordinary thinkers of all ages and the people who love them. We encourage, inspire, and provide strategies to motivate you to embrace your unique brilliance and realize your potential for success. Hi, I'm Diana Bader, also known as Coach Di. I encourage teens and young adults to become who they are and develop personal success through self-awareness and positivity. You can find me at freshcanvascoaching.com, follow and like the Fresh Canvas Facebook page, or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Di.
Hello there, I'm Becky Berry. I am a performance coach who helps people level up their lives by smoothing out the relationship between their work lives and their personal lives. You can find my website at beckyberrycoach.com. I'm on Twitter at Becky Berry Coach, and you can find me on my Facebook page, Becky Berry Coach.
Together we are here sharing our thoughts, insights, and experiences from our own uniquely brilliant perspective. Alrighty, today's episode 87, and we're talking about traction.
Traction. I love traction. Every time I think of traction, I think of tanks.
Yes.
I think of tanks. I love tanks. I love what do you call them?
Oh.
Kennedy's. I can hear Kennedy screaming in my head. Why do I have to tell you this every time, Mom? Not tires, but...
I want to say, it's not rotors either, but it's something like that. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't think of it.
All right, well, we'll think of it.
But, yes, well, and I have a tank story because there's a place here about an hour north of where we do our podcast, and I found out from a mutual friend of ours that there's a place called Tank Town. And a couple years ago, for my son's 16th birthday, we took him and his friend up there to Tank Town. And when you're 15, 16 years old, they let you actually drive a tank.
Yeah.
And they have a course, and it's got some cars you get to drive over that are already pretty flat, and a little hill that you get to go up. And
you get to drive it yourself?
And you get to drive it. Yeah, there's a guy standing there telling you what to do with the controls. But you're driving it yourself, and you can't go too fast on some parts, and you can't go too slow on other parts, and it was really fascinating for me because I've been used to driving. I got to drive too because my younger son couldn't drive, but he wanted to ride.
Wow! And
so you've got all these levers to move as opposed to just shifting it into gear.
Yeah, no, right? Well, you drive it a little bit like you drive. Like a landscape lawnmower, because my nephew, who's 8, got to drive my mom's landscape lawnmower last weekend when he was here. Then he drove the tractor with Ken. So 2 different, kind of cool things to drive where you got to have traction or else you're in trouble.
That's right, because they have to be able to go on all sorts of terrain, navigate the terrain.
And I'm sorry that this is really a difficult word for us because the word is tracks. They're called tracks.
Okay, that's sad.
Okay.
But the whole point of traction is to help you move forward.
Exactly.
And the key is you can't have traction without friction.
Right.
That's actually a quote from Seth Godin. Traction only happens with friction.
Yep.
Because there's got to be that grab, that pull that moves you forward. With the surface.
Exactly. The drag.
Mm-hmm. And we sometimes forget that in order to move forward, we have to dig a little into something,
right?
To help us get there.
Well, yeah, and like rough it up a little bit. That's what I was trying to say. Mm-hmm. Like rough it up a little bit. It's not.
You don't start off on the smooth and easy. Very seldom does anything start off smooth and easy.
Right.
That's why you got a rough draft of a book or a paper,
Well, the friction's where the creativity comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's where the things just feel like they're bugging you, like they're rubbing you the wrong way. Mm-hmm. Oh, friction. Rubbing you the wrong way, right? For me, the friction's like the balloon in my hair. Just like, like spread to the wind. But that without that friction, I can't go forward. I can't go forward. And I can. Excuse me. But it's not as rich an experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and the friction, as you're talking about that, I was thinking, is not always the most pleasant thing, and that's where a lot of people get stuck.
Hello.
It's like, okay, this is going to be hard. And then they start projecting.
Yeah.
And they miss the whole point of the fact that this is to move you forward. This is to grow. This is to whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's so they just get stuck and it's like, well, I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not comfortable.
No.
Growth is usually not comfortable. There's a reason they're called growing pains.
Well, and like when I was driving the tank or, anything else that needs that friction to move forward, it leaves tracks.
Whoa. I just had this image. Think about the amount of friction it takes for a tank to move. Mm-hmm. So I'm usually the one that uses all these military analogies. Now you're doing it. But think about when you're doing something big, how much traction, how much friction it takes to move something gigantic forward.
Yeah, so the bigger your idea, the more friction you're going to come up against.
Yeah.
That's very true.
It just flashed a minute. Mm-hmm. And you knew I would lose it if I didn't say something.
Well, and one of the fun things when we were doing this course was that there were things in our way. There were obstacles.
Oh, were they? Oh, man. This is such a great metaphor. I love it.
And so, but there was the traction with the tracks that allowed us to, we could either steer and go around them, or we could go over them. And that was way more fun, actually. If you think of any of the obstacles that get in your way as driving this tank and just going over and crushing them, that makes them way more fun.
There is a recommendation on LinkedIn from one of my clients that says she will make you go around it, over it, or through it. Mm-hmm. But there is no obstacle that we can't overcome. And yeah, exactly. And I am a tank, so just saying. I can be kind of forceful. Yeah, exactly. I love that, going over it and just stomp it down. And you know what? Where are those obstacles most of the time?
Oh.
The obstacles to our forward progress. Where are they most of the time?
Yeah, they're stuck in our head.
They're in our head. They're us.
Mm-hmm.
They're us. There's all that language. There's all those words. There's all those comparisons like our last episode talked about. There's all this junk.
Exactly.
And just run over it. And just grind it into the ground.
Mm-hmm. Don't let it impede your forward movement.
Well, yeah, let it give you traction.
That's exactly what happens when you run over something. It becomes part of that
impetus, right? Part of the impetus to go forward, right? Exactly. You change now energy leaves the system, so it has to do something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's craziness.
But, we're so resistant to friction, and we've gotten so much more so as a society, even on a global perspective. Mm-hmm. They keep putting up rules to prevent friction, so we don't have as much friction because, what if somebody gets upset? What if somebody... And it impedes our ability to strengthen ourselves, to grow when we don't allow a little bit of friction to grab hold of.
Yeah, exactly.
If you avoid it all the time, then you're going to be going all over the place.
Well, I have a friend who teaches classes in this, and it's to move communities forward. And what she does is a framework that she uses to turn that friction into traction, mm-hmm. so that you can move forward, that you can hear the voices, you can process the ideas, and use that friction to get the traction you need to change a situation. And that's what we're missing.
Yes.
And it's a big deal. There's a lot of progress that's not happening because so many of us have lost the ability to deal with the friction, mm-hmm. to have a toolkit for dealing with the friction and understanding that friction can give us that positive forward movement.
I totally agree. And I keep picturing, back in the early days of this country in the 1800s, people going across the country mm-hmm. in a covered wagon and all these things all the obstacles that they had no idea they were going to meet.
Right.
But it didn't stop where they were going. And
Yeah, but those were really particular kinds of people that did that.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you and I would do it.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, I can name 10 people I know who wouldn't do it. You can too, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. But, it's those people that are the innovators that, there was something, last week we were talking about something that if cell service ceased to exist.
Oh, we talked about this. Yeah.
And I think I was talking about it with one of my kids too. How many people would freak out? And,
well, I would, because it's the only phone I have now, so that would be not a good thing for me.
Mm-hmm. But there's other ways to get, people don't think first that, if I didn't have a cell service, I can still drive over to Becky's house and say hey, or find out what's going on. That whole concept sort of dissipates. And we were talking about that, and with the all the new ideas, all the things that we get accustomed to started off as an idea that had friction with it.
Oh, yeah.
That moved us forward.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
we tend to
people
forget
thought
that.
the iPhone was stupid. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants a computer in their hand. Well, yeah, we do.
Now you can't pry one out of a lot of people's hands.
Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, I can run my whole business on my phone, and I do.
Isn't that amazing?
And I love it. It sure beats the heck out of the 40-pound, portable computer I traveled with. Mm-hmm. Seriously, But there's always friction around innovative ideas.
Until they become mainstream.
Right.
And then there becomes the friction over losing them.
Right.
It's really kind of an interesting...
Well, you've got to have, to go back to Seth Godin, he has the thing about early adopters and then the people who pick it up in the middle and, then the ones who, after it's been out 5 or 6 years, they'll go get an old one, kind of thing. And that's just part of where your personal, where you get traction personally. How much friction you're willing to deal with. Your friends going, oh, that is ridiculous. Why did you buy that? That is nuts. That kind of thing. Or are you like, so? I like to have the latest and the greatest.
Yeah.
Which is, totally awesome.
But I think one of the things that we tend to forget is how much friction it took to get that traction to get some of these ideas out there that we now...
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you remember when podcasts first started? Like it was before iPhones. It was with iPods. And I want to say like early 2000s-ish, because one of my girlfriends had a podcast. I never once listened to it. Mm-hmm. I thought, well, that's just weird.
Yeah. And I always thought it was interesting because radio shows were the things that my grandfather listened to. Mm-hmm. And, then we moved on.
Well, and then, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, but it's kind of cool how we've come back around because now...
Except it's better because it's on demand, my favorite words. Mm-hmm. Those are my favorite words. On demand.
Well, and you can pick and choose. And so if you're stuck in traffic, you can learn new stuff. You can listen to whomever you want. That on-demand thing is really amazing.
Yeah, I love it. Time shifting. Email was the beginning of the time shifting, which I adore. People are like, oh, I hate email. I'm like, why? I'm like, excuse me? I like email because if I'm awake at 1 a.m. or 5 a.m. like I was this morning, which anybody who listens to this podcast knows that's not me. It's not my preference. I can email you, and I'm not going to wake you up. And you can respond to it when you want to respond to it. And, I delete over 100 emails a day. People are like, well, why do you subscribe to those things if you delete them? I'm like, well, sometimes I don't delete them. But I don't have to read them. Yeah. You're like, oh, I'm like, choices. And for me to, it's all about that friction. What causes you friction.
Yeah. Well, it's all that forward movement. Mm-hmm. I can't think of... I'm just trying to think of anything that doesn't have a little bit of friction with it.
To get the traction.
That gets,
well, on demand. You know how people poo-pooed it, and it's ridiculous, and people, they want to, no, people want on demand. People want on demand.
And when you get used to something, then, then it becomes like a thing. So on demand is now a thing that we're used to. And the next little bit of friction will be the next thing that we haven't quite adjusted to yet before it becomes the norm.
Mm-hmm. Driverless cars. Lots of friction. Lots of friction. But they're going to gain traction. They're going to gain traction because they change people's lives. People who can't drive, who have to who have to rely on other people to drive them. Mm-hmm. And I'm not just talking about elderly. I'm talking about people who are disabled. It just changes the whole world. I mean, a kid just goes, "I'll never have to take your keys away. I'm like, that's right. You'll never have to take my keys away." But the friction that's going on right now as they try to get traction, you don't get traction. As they try to gain traction is huge because of all the outliers, all the considerations. And so people are scared of it. They have all these emotions around it because it's going to cause a lot of friction because change.
Yeah. And that's going to be a tough one just because you're telling people they have to give up control. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of resistance to the friction happens, is when you're telling somebody that this is going to be something you have to give up control over. Yeah, well, people like their control.
Well, I always love that. I'm like, when was the last time you took away somebody's keys? Which I have done 3 times. Mm-hmm. And let me just tell you, you want to give up control, take away somebody's keys.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just so, if you have a stroke, I mean, just things that destroy your life because they take away socialization, those, and these are the society changing, shape shifting kind of things that cause tremendous friction because of fear,
Yeah.
And then when many times when we have the time to sit back and watch it unfold, we're like, oh my goodness. And that oh my goodness moment is when it gains traction. Mm-hmm. And I would wager to say that's what happens to us too. Mm-hmm. When we're working, when we're it was an oh my goodness moment for me that really changed my whole energy. The moment that I failed the tech conservatory and didn't know I'd done it and thought I had totally failed, that it was not going to happen. And then I went, wait, I have actually done this. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. And everything changed. I got traction. I got as much traction as I wanted. And it took away a level of friction, but it's still, there's still that friction you need to keep going.
Well, and I think, listening to you talk about that, I think one of the things people tend to get confused is the idea of traction and momentum.
Hello. Big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like that.
Because, traction is the moving forward. Momentum keeps you moving forward. So you have to keep dealing with the friction to gain momentum.
Well, and momentum's more a function of energy than traction is. Mm-hmm. Traction's a function of friction.
Yep.
Momentum's a function of energy.
It's that thing that you were just saying before. It's that, oh my. Mm-hmm. That's when the momentum starts. Mm-hmm. But you've got to get, you got to get,
I had to get traction with the idea.
Yep.
To develop the momentum.
It's like when a plane takes off. It's got traction on the runway, but once it gets momentum, it's airborne.
Well, and listen, without friction, we all fall down because we're all sliding around on a glass, right?
That reminds me of Crocs.
Yeah.
Because they had no traction, so you created no friction with them. So if anything was slightly smooth surface.
Oh no! So
I fell on my butt more than once on those.
Oh really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you need that friction. need that friction. We were talking earlier about when we were talking about the episode that you don't get traction, you gain traction.
I love that.
It's a process. Everything has to come together. I mean, from when they're talking at NASCAR about a car the best car, the fastest car, the fastest car always has the best traction because they can stay on the track. Mm-hmm. That means they got the most friction too. So, you gain traction. It doesn't just happen. Things have to come together. Things have to come together in a certain way, whether you can identify that way and explain that way or not. I mean, obviously you can on a tire and a racetrack and a race car, but when you're creating, when you're going for traction in your business, with your business idea or with your personal idea.
Well, it's like what you were saying earlier. traction isn't something you get, it's something you earn.
Right.
And so there's a learning component to it.
Yeah.
So with the cars or your business or whatever, sometimes that friction is actually the learning component. You know, there's got to be a certain amount of tread on a race car, but it can't be too much, it can't be too little, because otherwise you're going to slow yourself down. Mm-hmm. You know, it's got to be comparable with the track.
And you've got to have enough to have the traction, but no more.
Yes.
But no more. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. And what I was saying was, you don't always know how the pieces come together.
No.
You don't always understand because I spend a lot of time when something works trying to figure out how did it work. And I'm like, I have no idea. Because I'm already like 10 miles away. So that can be, you just have to go, oh, thanks. Okay. This is how it worked. I'm grateful it worked this way, and keep going. But there's frequently elements, you know.
Well, sometimes it's good to go back and unpack it.
Right.
You may not, because when you're in the moment, you're just grateful. It's okay, I'm moving forward. And sometimes when you come up against a little extra friction, it's helpful to go backwards and say, okay, I've been through friction before. Mm-hmm. How did I do it? Is this comparable kind of friction? I mean, ask a lot of questions. And
where's this friction taking me? Mm-hmm. Right.
But also remind yourself that you have been through it before. Mm-hmm. You've been through different things before. So that shouldn't impede your forward movement. It shouldn't impede your growth. It shouldn't impede anything, because you know you can do it. It's some of that resilience.
Well, you know you can get that traction. Mm-hmm. You know you can get that traction. Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. And it's just so important to remember that there's really no progress without friction. There's no traction for an idea. It's just nothing without that friction. When we walk, it's friction.
Well, and
that gives our feet traction.
Well, and I like to think of, just sort of personal experiences give your life friction, and when you allow yourself to learn from them, that's where the traction comes from.
Right. And
that's what propels you forward.
Right.
If you didn't have the friction,
well, propels you forward. That's a momentum word. So that's what keeps you. I can totally, like, I can hear a tank in my head, but it keeps you moving forward. Mm-hmm. Keeps you moving forward. Yeah. I agree.
Well, and it keeps you focused on moving forward, I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. That is more about focus, isn't it?
It gives you that direction to move forward.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
And leave the friction behind. That's where the tread is.
I like
the tracks.
That. I like that. All right. Well, let's stop and let's figure out our stamp of brilliance, and we'll be right back.
All right. Today our stamp of brilliance comes to us from Seth Godin, when he said, "Traction only happens with friction."
Elegant.
Very much so. Couldn't have said it better myself. All right. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with a friend. Also take a minute to rate it and leave a review on iTunes. Check out our website at uniquelybrilliant.me and sign up to have the podcast delivered directly to your inbox. Shoot any thoughts, comments, and suggestions to us at uniquelybrilliant.me. And you can also reach out to us on our Facebook page. And don't forget to like us.
So we'll get some traction. Until next time.